Well, greetings, people of the internet. Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Today, I've crossed over to the dark side again, and we're going to look at Truenas and ZFS. But I'm going to explain to you why I'm looking at Truenas and ZFS again. So let me make a little clarification. When I say the dark side, I know y'all have heard me go on endlessly about why I don't think ZFS is a big deal and why I don't use it, and I've used it before, etc. But I'm still curious about it, right? And what piqued my curiosity about ZFS is their deduplication. I noticed as I was moving data around on my network that I have a lot of data that is replicated in other places, especially if you're doing a lot of virtual machine files. You can use a lot less disk space if you have deduplication enabled on your NAS, if it's capable of doing it. Now, if you've been watching my live streams, you'll also notice that, or you'll also know that I've been very curious about getting my hands on a QNAP NAS with the Hero operating system on it, because it has ZFS built into it. The plan is to sell my DS918 Plus, my Synology, because it doesn't support 10 gig. And then I was looking for a replacement so I could DIY, build my own, right? And I'm the king of cheap, so I'd love to do that. I could get another Synology, say like a 1621 Synology, which supports 10 gig and NVMe and gives me 6 drives of storage as opposed to 4. Or I could go something with like the QNAP. But beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and until I get my hands on one, I can't very well judge QNAP as harshly as others. There's a YouTuber I watch called It's My Natural Color, and Tom has a channel over in the UK, and he just did a series of videos all about his QNAP NAS. Now, mind you, they were paid advertisements, basically, because QNAP sent him a unit to evaluate. But what this boils down to is, do I need ZFS? Am I going to gain any benefit by it? And can I utilize deduplication? That's the question. So what I've decided to do is, nothing's better than personal experience, right? So I have decided to build a Truenas NAS, but I'm going to do things a little bit differently. Now, I'm installing Truenas, but you know me, Unky Joe, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. So does everyone remember my Unraid machine? It's got the Gigabyte DAZ77DS-H3 or DS3H motherboard in it. It's got an i7-3770. It's got 24 gig of RAM. It's got multiple PCI Express slots. I think it's got 3 on there, 2 or 3. It has USB 3. It's a good motherboard for its time. I've used it for Unraid. I've used it for a lot of other projects. Well, today what I'm going to do is I've put Hyper-V, Windows Server 2019 running Hyper-V on there. Now, originally I was going to do it with VMware, but VMware 6.7 and 7 do not support the network card that's in there. I know VMware can be adapted to support the network card, but I frankly didn't want to go through the headache. I know Server 2019, I know Hyper-V, and I know I can pass my hard drives through Hyper-V. So that's what we've done today. I've got Server 2019 up and running here, and I'm going to show you start to finish on how I installed Truenas and configured it so that you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's waste no more time. Let's get to that video right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is go out and get my hard drives prepped. And this is the unit that has the 4 2 terabyte drives. So I'm going to come over here to disk management. And what we need to do is we need to wipe out everything on these drives and then take them offline in order for them to be passed through to a virtual machine under Hyper-V. So we could pass the controller through, but I find this way works just as well. And actually, I don't know how to pass the controller through on Hyper-V. Plus, I have another hard drive or an SSD running on that controller, so we'll just do this the way I know how. So right-click on the drive, and we're just going to delete the volumes on these 4 drives. So now that I have all 4 volumes deleted, I'll just right click and take these drives offline. Okay, so we get the drives offline. So now I'm done with Disk Manager. Now I'm going to go into Hyper-V Manager. And since this is a new install of Hyper-V, the first thing I like to do is rename my switch. So I'm going to call this Gigabit 1 for 1 gigabit and vert. And that'll be connected to the Qualcomm. This is what it created when it installed Hyper-V. Now the other thing is, on the Hyper-V settings, this is where it's going to store. Since I don't have any shared storage set up on this, I'm just going to run this virtual machine. It's only going to be about 20 or 30 gigabytes in size for the virtual machine file and the virtual hard drive for Truenas. So I'm just going to run it off the fast SSD storage. So we'll leave these 2 settings to default. We can come back later and move that over to shared storage if we want to. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just going to leave it where it is. Now what I'm going to do is create a new virtual machine. Now what we're going to do, we'll click on next here, and I'm going to call this Truenas, and we'll call it Truenas 12. Click on next. To make your life easy, make this a Gen 1 machine. Gen 2 machines are basically for computers that need the UEFI BIOS. You're not going to benefit anything by doing Gen 2. I don't even know that Truenas will work under a Gen 2. So I'm just going to set it for a Gen 1 machine. Now I'm going to start it out with 8 gig of RAM. I have 24 gig on this machine. I'm not going to use dynamic memory. Click on next. We're going to connect it to that Gigabit 1 vert switch. That's why I renamed that switch under here, so it'll be easy to identify. Click on next. And then I'm just going to set up I'm going to do a 30, now I'll do a 20 gig hard drive. That should be more than enough. And it's going to store it in its default location. Click on next. Now I'm not going to install an operating system right now. I'm just going to click next through this and then finish. And the reason I did it that way is because I want to come up here and right click on the machine and go to settings. And I want to give this thing 4 virtual processors and apply. Now, and then I want to come down here to the IDE controller, click on image file. Now I've already copied the Truenas image over to my ISO folder on my C drive. And there it is. So I'm going to have it boot off of that. Now, I haven't connected the other hard drives yet. What I like to do is get Truenas installed, make sure it's up and running, get it assigned an IP address, and then come back and add the hard drives later. So I'm going to click on OK. Then I'm going to right click on the virtual machine, connect, and then we'll go ahead and we will start the virtual machine. And that should start the install CD, which it does. So I'm going to hit enter here. Now the beauty of Truenas is it knows it's running on Hyper-V. As you can see there, it's loading the Hyper-V drivers for the operating system. So I'm going to choose option 1, install upgrade, click on OK. I'm going to install it to the Microsoft Virtual 20 gig hard drive, click OK. And I'm going to proceed with the installation. Then we need to enter a super secret password. Click OK, and we're going to boot via BIOS because remember we set this up as a Gen 1 machine. So hit enter, let the install run. The installation is complete. It says please reboot and remove the installation media. I'm going to click OK, and then I'm going to go ahead and shut down the system. Alright, so now it's turned off. So now I'm going to come back to File and Settings. And I'm going to remove that CD-ROM drive. It doesn't need to boot off of that. And then we can go ahead and start the virtual machine. Going to hit enter and let it boot. Now the first time it boots up, it's got to generate that SSH or it's got to generate a key file, which takes a few minutes. So it sees our network card. Here we go. So it's generating our DH. What is it generating? DH, the key, which takes a few minutes. Okay, so the IP address is at 5.55. So we're going to leave that alone, and we're going to go out and we're going to connect via a browser and do the rest of the configuration. All right, so I've opened a browser window under Edge, and I'm going to log in as root, and then using our super secret password. Go ahead and click on Login and get started, and we should see our 4 CPUs. We should see 8 gig of RAM. We should see that it's Truenas 12.0 U2.1. So that was the current version as of today, which is April Fool's Day. All right, so a couple of things I like to do first. Trying to remember where they are. Let's go to, let's see, is it network summary, global configuration. There we go. So I like to change, I'm going to leave the host name at Truenas, but I'm going to change it to midearth.local and click on save. I just like to do that so that the name on the dashboard is something that I understand what it is. So you'll see it still says Truenas.local, but if I refresh, it should say Truenas.midearth.local. So now we've got it booted up. So the next thing we need to do is attach the hard drives to it, which, as you can see, if we go to storage, there are no pools and there are no drives to add at all. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to shut down the virtual machine. Confirm, click on shutdown. So it shut down cleanly. I didn't have to install anything under Hyper-V to get it to shut down. I didn't have to add any drivers or anything. But the next thing I want to do now is connect the hard drives. And this is where it could get a little confusing. So I'm going to go to File, Settings. I'm still on the virtual machine. And I'm going to come under here under the SCSI controller because we're going to add these drives as SCSI drives. Or as my friend Victor Bart likes to say, SCSI drives. So we'll come over here, SCSI controller. We're going to add a hard drive. Click on Add. And then we'll just add each hard drive. There should be a total of 4 of them. So we add the first one, apply. We're going to come back up here, add another one, physical disk 2, and apply. Same way with disk 3, apply, and then disk 4, and apply. So now all 4 hard drives are passed through via that SCSI controller to Truenas. So we'll click on OK. So now we can go ahead and start the VM again. And we should see that it'll start seeing that the hard drives in here. It should see the serial numbers and the drives. You can see 512 byte sectors. It sees the drives. And then once it comes up and gives us the IP address, then we'll be able to go back out to the web browser. And there it is. So 5.55. So let's go back to a web browser. So we'll log in as root now. And our super secret password. Now, mind you, I'm not going to do a detailed setup of Truenas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through, show you how to set up the drive pool. We're going to add a couple of users, maybe a group, and then we're going to add a share on here so I can show you how to do that. So the first thing we need to do is get our storage set up. So we'll come over here to storage and go to pools, and I'm going to go to add a pool, and I'm going to create a new pool. And I'm just going to have it suggest a layout. So the layout is it wants all 4 of those drives and it wants to put them in a RAID Z2, but I don't need 2 drives of redundancy. I'm looking for more storage, so I'm going to do a RAID Z, and you'll see that'll give me 5.45 terabytes of storage. And I'm just going to call this test pool. So if I've done everything right, selected all 4 drives, I should be able to click on create, confirm, and then I should be able to create the pool. And there we are. We have a test pool. It's available. I can click on it. I can, let's see. That's it. I can view it. I can go to the disks, and as you can see, it sees each individual disk. It sees the serial number. It knows what model of hard drive it is. The smart is enabled, and it can communicate with the drive. And we can set up even smart tests if we want to. If we come back here to the dashboard, as you can see, we now have our test pool available, 4 disks. Pool status is online. So now we're back on our Windows Server 2019, and you can see here it is. Here's the status with the virtual machine loaded. Here's how much RAM is in use, and then we have our Ethernet controller on here. So the next thing we want to do is go create some users and groups under Truenas, and then we'll move on from there. So I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of accounts. So I'm just going to come here under users, and I'm going to, it's giving me a warning, so I'm going to click on add, and I'm going to type in Bill Adama, and Adama is our supervisor, you know, our admin user. Type in his super secret password. Now, it's very important if you have a Windows network that you click on this Microsoft account. If you click on the help, one thing I like about the new version of Truenas is they have the context-sensitive help. It's very helpful. So you set this to allow additional username authentication methods when the user is connecting from a Windows 8 or newer operating system, which I will be. And it's just a way of tying in the Windows login or the Active Directory login with your Truenas server. Just makes your life easier. And I'm going to go ahead and submit that user. Now you notice I didn't do anything else except enter the username and password, etc. I'm going to do the same thing for my account. If I could learn to spell my own last name. And I'm making my password in here the same as it is on my Windows Active Directory or my Windows login, so that it's consistent and I don't have to enter that when we go to the network browser. So I'm going to go ahead and submit. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come here to groups, and I'm going to create a new group. And we're just going to call it UJP for Unky Joe's Playhouse. And click on Submit. So there's an old adage, you add users and then you add users to groups, and groups get permissions. So that's what we're going to do under Linux as well. So I'm going to come here to the group now, and I'm going to add members. And I'm going to come all the way down here to the bottom, and I'm going to add Adama and Jay Straley to that group. Okay, so now we have our users and now we have our groups. And we come back to dashboard and we see our drives are still online. 7% CPU. We're not really going to be using the CPU much because we're not doing anything on it. Now keep in mind, we're not going to be using plugins, jails, or virtual machines. We are strictly using Truenas to give us access to a ZFS file system to test it. So the next thing I want to do is come here to storage, and it's not intuitive how Truenas does their sharing. So I'm teaching you the way I was taught. What I want to do is come here to the pool, and I want to add a data set, okay? And I'm just going to call this data set test, okay? And I'm going to click on submit. And then under this, I can go to edit permissions. There we go.
And then what I'm going to do is use ACL Manager, and this is basically for Windows shares. So I'm going to use ACL Manager, and I'm going to select a preset ACL, and that is I'm going to create an open ACL and continue. Now, the user I'm going to leave is root, but on the group, I'm going to change that to UJP, the group I created earlier. And I'm going to click on Apply Group. So, according to the access control list, let's see, basic, full control, group, allow basic, full control. So, by setting this and clicking this box, I'm going to apply these permissions to this data set, okay? And if I click on this one, say for example, I already had this data set created, it would apply the permissions recursively. So any files and folders I already had on there, it would apply that to them as well. I just make it a habit to go ahead and apply them recursively just in case, and then click on Save, okay? So now we've created a file system called test. Now we need to go out and we need to actually create a Windows share. I know it's not real intuitive, but this is how it works. So I'm going to click on Add, and then I'm going to check the path to test, which has an ACL, okay? We're going to use default share permissions, right? We're just going to call this test share, and we're going to click on Submit. And then we're going to enable the service so that we're able to see it. And it tells us the SMB service has been enabled, so we'll go ahead and click on Close. Now I'm going to come back here to the dashboard, and we can see all is right with the world. Now to see if our share is working, what we need to do is come out to Windows File Explorer, and if I type in / the name of the NAS, which is called Truenas, and hit Enter, if I've done this correctly, it should connect up to the test share. If I double click on that, I should have access to it. And then if I right click and do New Folder, I should be able to write a folder to it. And I can. So that means my permissions are correct. Now I'm using the user J Straley that I created. But if I had logged into this machine with Adama, it would have worked on that as well. So now what I want to do is start copying some data over to this test folder. But what I want to do is go back one, and I'm going to actually map a network drive. And I'm going to map the network drive of, let's see, T is available. So we use T for Truenas. Click on Finish. And then now we have drive letter T is assigned to the Truenas test folder. So now let's start copying some data over there and see how our performance is. So I'm copying some data over from my local SSD or NVMe drive over to my Truenas server. And right now it's getting about anywhere between 50 and 100 megabytes per second, depending on the file sizes. Some of these files are large, some are small, but as you can see, I'm getting consistent 100 megabit per second transfer rates. Now, if we go over to Truenas, we'll see the impact it's having, about 31% CPU usage. You can see my VDEV is up and running. You can see my network card is up and running. It's getting about 104 megabits per second. So we're getting good performance on this file transfer, which is what I wanted to make sure of, is that that adding Hyper-V to the mix would not slow down the file transfer process. And as you can clearly see, it's doing quite well on the file transfer speeds. That's what I would get with my Synology NAS or any other NAS I have connected to it. But the beauty of running this under Hyper-V 2019 server is I could add a 10 gig network card in here and in effect get 10 gig networking speeds. But I just wanted to show you how trivial it was, or simple it was, to set up a Truenas virtual server, and to see that even with a off-the-shelf NIC card, which is a, what is that? I think it's a, let's go out and see what brand of NIC card is in this server. I think it's a Qualcomm. Let's go to Device Manager. Network adapter. Yeah, it's a Qualcomm Atheros 8161. And again, another reason I use Hyper-V and Server 2019. I was going to put ESXi 6.7 on here, but it does not support the Qualcomm network card in here. So it was just easier for my life to put Windows on here. I'm more familiar with it. And so we'll let this, I don't think we're going to have any more issues. We'll let the copy finish. And then what I'm going to really do is start putting some data on there that I know has duplicate files from different folders. And then we're going to turn on the deduplication. Now, it's my understanding the deduplication feature of Truenas is going to require at least 16 gig of RAM. So we'll have to play around with the RAM settings probably before we can turn that on. But that'll be one of the experiments we do to see if Truenas is going to live up to, and the ZFS file system is going to live up to the standards that I need. And one of the primary reasons of switching from Synology to Truenas is or to the QNAP for that matter, is because I wanted to capture that ability of ZFS to do deduplication.
Now, I could have just installed Truenas directly onto that machine, and I did attempt to do that, and I don't know why. Truenas, I think, just doesn't like me, or FreeNAS, whatever you want to call it this week. I had problems getting Truenas to load directly onto this machine, and I just eventually gave up and moved on to other things, but filed it away for future reference. So I was able to get Windows Server 2019 installed on here without any trouble, get Hyper-V configured, and as you saw, Truenas is running. Everything except for the smart testing seems to be working on here. It passes through the drive serial numbers and the temperature information, all that good stuff. I was able to, as you saw, create a data volume and create VDEVs and go out there and share the files, and I'm getting really good copy speeds for a gigabit network. They're normal. I was even able to do some testing on this where I removed a hard drive while the system was running to see if it would keep running and if it would flag the drive as being bad. It did. Now the only caveat is that because of the older BIOS I have on this, it does not support hot swapping hard drives. I think it's a BIOS setting I have to go out and set. So the one thing I had to do was when I went to put the drive back into Truenas and get it to resilver, it still didn't see the drive. I had to actually shut down Truenas, then restart the virtual machine running Truenas, and then it was able to see the drive and go ahead and resilver. And I wasn't copying any other data to the server while the drive was offline, so the resilvering process took a minimal amount of time. And overall, I was very happy with this setup. It was fast, it was speedy, and frankly, the only features of Truenas that I would use are ZFS. I don't use their jails. I'm not fond of running virtual machines under Truenas. I think where Truenas really shines is how it manages ZFS. And frankly, I can roll ZFS on my own. So there you go, people of the internet. We hope you found the video entertaining and informative. As always, please leave your comments in the comments section. Give us a thumbs up if you liked the video. Donate if you're so inclined. We take PayPal, Patreon, and the YouTube join function. And don't forget to join us. We have a live stream, usually Saturdays at noon or 1 p.m., just depending on how I'm feeling that week. And we will send out notifications to everybody, all of our subscribers, when we are going to have a live stream a few days in advance, so you'll have time to set aside the time and plan. Please come back and see us again, and don't forget, we'll see all of you on the other side.